Good morning, students. My name is Dr. Babette Le Roux. I'm your lecturer for children's literature. It's the second level or second year module. Under normal circumstances, we would have met face to face. It's a pity that we can't, but since we have technology, this is the best we can do. It doesn't mean we can't work and we can't share information with you. On the screen right now, you will see my name and you will see my cell phone number as well as my email address. When you need to call, when you have queries, when you need clarity on information, please don't hesitate to ask. Even if it's lockdown, we are working and we are there for you to assist you. So there you have again my cell phone number. You can call me, you can WhatsApp or email me. Just always remember to include the module name as well as your name and your student number when you make contact with us. Then the purpose of this presentation is just to give you orientation on the first 3 learning units. We're going to have 2 more sessions later in this year. So we're going to start off by giving you just an overview of the whole module, and then we're just going to focus for this session, we're going to focus on the first 3 learning units. So this module has 6 learning units, and there you see it on the screen. Learning Unit 1 is going to focus on the different genres of children's literature. Learning Unit 2 is going to focus on how to develop and promote a love for reading in young children. Learning Unit 3 is going to focus on emergent literacy and emergent numeracy and how to use children's literature to enhance the development of emergent literacy and numeracy. Learning Unit 4 is going to focus on language development as well as cognitive development. Language development is a cognitive skill, and how to use children's literature to facilitate language development. Learning Unit 5 then, we're going to move to oral language, speaking, and then also writing, creative writing, and how the two complement one another. Then the last learning unit, Learning Unit 6, we're going to use children's literature to address social issues children might face. So going forward, this module is not explicitly included in your teaching practice modules. However, when you study this content, it will help you in other modules such as emergent literacy, emergent numeracy, reading in the foundation phase, life skills, because using children's literature is the ideal medium for personal development and social well-being. Or also home language teaching and first additional language teaching. So the content of this module is not a standalone, but it will assist you and complement these other modules. So the broad outcomes of this module is first of all to define children's literature. What is children's literature? Then we're going to identify and classify literature genres in children's literature. We're going to analyze these genres for use in language teaching. We're going to look at how to select appropriate literature for children from diverse backgrounds. And then, as I've said in the last learning unit, where we're going to focus on how to use children's literature to explain social issues. One of the most important aspects of reading or listening to stories or storytelling is to be able to understand it, comprehension. And we're also going to focus on how to enhance or to improve children's understanding of text. This module, as the majority of programs UNISA offers, is presented by means of blended learning. It simply means it's a mixed mode of delivery, like we're doing now. you've received, hopefully, a hard copy of the study material, hard copies of the tutorial letters, but you also have access to it electronically, and you also have access to e-tutors that assist you on the module site, on my UNISA, online platform, online activities that is available to you and that I hope you are making use of. There's also no prescribed textbook for this module. To help you to study, I've provided you with a study plan that you can use. There's no need to follow it rigidly. You are most welcome to adapt it to your circumstances and your needs. It's available if you use your student number and you log into my UNISA and you click on my modules and you select CHL2601, which is the code for children's literature. The module site will open, and on the left side of the screen you will find a menu, and if you click on additional resources, you will find the study plan. Then I quickly want to say something about the assignments. Usually the first assignment is multiple choice questions. The due date, that was the 8th of May, has been extended to 19th of June to provide students an opportunity to complete this assignment. It's due to early industrial action that we had at UNISA, but also to the lockdown. Assignment 2 usually is your essay type questions. The due date there, once again, that was the 7th of June. It's extended to the 30th, just to the end of June. We strongly advise now during the lockdown that you submit your assignments online, as there's no staff available on campus to receive your assignments, to work through it, to record it and physically deliver it to lecturers' offices. So the best way going forward is to submit online. Regarding assignment 1, the multiple choice questions, it is also available on your module site. So once you're on the module site for children's literature, on the left-hand side of the screen where you have the menu, you go to online assessment. And when you click on online assessment, you will find assignment 1 there, and you can do it online. Then at the end of the year, usually around mid-October, towards the end of October, it's the examination session, which is venue-based. So like I said, the purpose of this assignment is to just give you a broad overview of the module content first of all, but then to focus more specifically only on learning units 1, 2, and 3. When you do assignment 1, the purpose of assignment 1, multiple choice questions, is to take you through the study material in a systematic manner. So you rely on skimming and scanning techniques to read the questions in assignment 1, the multiple choice questions, and go and search for the answers. So it's basically to test your knowledge. It's a literal testing of your knowledge. But the purpose is just to take you through the module content so that you get a broad overview of what the content is. Unfortunately, last year, for some or other reason, a few typos, we found a few typos in the assignment after it was already printed, which makes it difficult for you to finish your assignment. I think, if I can remember correctly, question 5 of the multiple choice questions, and I think also 7 and question 11, if I remember correctly. Some of the options that were given to you are duplicates, or where it should have been numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it was numbered ABC. So we've corrected that in tutorial letter 102 that was sent out as an errata. So if you haven't done it yet, please make sure that you download tutorial letter 102 so that you get the correct information. Obviously, when you do assignment 1 directly, when you're in your module content and you click on online assessment, I've corrected it there, so you won't have that problem when you do the assignment online. I've already explained how to do it. Then I want to move to assignment 2. Although the due date is only the end of June, some students have already submitted and we have started with the marking. So I'm going to guide you through the assignment 2, and give you some tip-offs in terms of how to approach assignment 2 and what is required of you. Question 1, which is basically define children's literature, define genres, define Africanization. The answers are explicit in the learning material. So you just go to the correct pages 1 and 2 of your study guide, and you'll find it there. What we've seen when we started marking is that students copy the definitions as it is there, and then it's difficult to determine or to establish whether students really understand the concept. I'm going to use the definition of context because that's one of the elements that you need to define, context. Many students go and they literally copy the definition that was provided there. Now, the definition of context there was not very clearly explained explicitly to the context of children's literature. So they copy the definition that's in the study guide, but it doesn't tell me if you understand what context means. So you need to give the definition, or to tell us in your own words, what do you understand when I ask you, what do you understand by the term context? Now, context is simply when you refer to a familiar or environment that is familiar to a young child. It may be a physical environment, like when a child is in a rural area, the context of the story is a rural setting. Or when a child is in a town or a city that's at a seaside, that is a familiar context. It's a physical setting that is familiar to a child. But it may also refer to a familiar cultural environment. And that's explained in the context or in the concept of Africanization, for example. Apologies. Although Africanization refers also to context, it's very specifically an acknowledgement of the African culture. So in that way, context also not just refer to a physical setting, but also to a cultural setting that may be familiar to a child. So that's the way that you need to define things. We want to see your own understanding. Sometimes you give us words that I don't know if you understand what it is that you're saying yourself. So make it simple and easy. Question 2, the answers are also explicit in the learning material, although we find that students really don't know what we are asking of them. So to answer question 2, it's question 2.1 and question 2.2. Go to page 10 and 11 of your study guide. It's tutorial letter 501, that's your study guide. And on page 10 and 11, you'll find some headings. In question 2.1, you just name or list the headings. In question 2.2, you are going to discuss those elements, those criteria. So that's what's required of you in question 2. Then when it gets to question 3, unfortunately, in the table, they only provide you with 4 types of comprehension. But on page 30 of the study guide, there are 6 types of comprehension. And this question is out of 10 marks. So if you only use those 4 types of comprehension and you explain those 4, it's 8 marks. So although it's not asked or required explicitly of you to add one more, please add one more of your choice. So to get that information, go to page 30 of your study guide. Then in terms of question 4, this question is out of 20 marks. It not only requires that you have a thorough understanding of Piaget's stages of cognitive development, but you also need to apply it. Now, we've also found that when students apply, they forget this module is children's literature. It's about books. It's about stories. So when you discuss the milestones of Piaget as per stage, what does it mean in terms of stories, of children's literature, of books? I'm going to use the first stage of Piaget just to give you an example of what's required in terms of the milestones, and then how to apply it in terms of what does it mean for books and reading. So the first of Piaget's stages is the sensory motor stage, and it's basically the development of children from birth to around about 18 months, 2 years of age. So it's babies. You as a teacher won't deal with children in this stage, but what does it mean then for parents preparing children to go to school one day? So in this stage, you need to understand sensory motor stage. The word sensory is there. It refers to senses and motor development. So how does a baby in this stage make sense of the world? Through movement. They crawl around. They put everything they come across in their mouths. They push things up their noses, to give you such a horrific example. But they touch and they explore. They also learn how to use language, although at this stage they may not be able to speak yet, but they learn language. So now let's go to the application. What does this mean then in terms of books and provisioning of literature? Because children like to move around and touch and put everything in their mouths, you need to give them books that's appropriate for this age. It may be books that the pages aren't made of paper, but on plastic that they can play with in the bath, or that's made of material that they won't be able to tear when they handle the book. Obviously, also, the pages need to be thick so that children who doesn't have full control of their small muscle motors, their fingers, so that it will be easy for them to turn the pages. Also, because they crawl around with the books and they manhandle the books, the corners of the pages needs to be rounded. It must be non-toxic because it's going to go to the mouth. Further, because they love to move around, they can't sit still for longer than 2 minutes. When you're going to read them a story, they're not going to sit still on your lap. They're going to move around. It's okay. So this is what we want you to do when you go then and you discuss the other 3 stages of Piaget. So make sure you give us enough information, because this question is out of 20 marks. Then in terms of question 5, it's actually a very lovely question, but the markers found that you also battle with the practical application of this specific question. Question 5.1 is easy enough. You have to identify a community that you're familiar with. You don't need access to a school, you don't need access to learners to do this. Just refer to a community you are familiar with, a rural community or where you are at. And then you tell us why you've chosen that community and what are the challenges, the social challenges that community is experienced. And you give us just some information. This question is out of 8 marks. Then, once you've identified the challenges of children in that community, you now have to, in question 5.2, select a suitable children's story. Now, I know it's lockdown. You don't have access to a school library or community library. It's not as easy just to go and select a story. If you have access to the internet and you have data and you are able to do a Google search, do it. You'll be able to come up with fantastic examples of stories that can be used to address social challenges such as being bullied or having a very specific fear, like some children fear the dark, or there might be some domestic violence and the story is addressing that. So whatever literature you can find on the internet that will address a specific issue, that will be first prize. If not, you can come up with a story, because remember, in the definition of children's literature, it not only refers to printed text, but also to the traditional form of oral storytelling. Some cultures, it's the predominant form of literature for children, oral storytelling. So you are then most welcome to come up with your own story. Although it's going to complicate the practical application in the next question, but we'll deal with it just now. When you come up with your own story, please remember, we are addressing how to teach children in the foundation phase, grade R, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. So when you come up with your own story, please make sure that this story is appropriate for that age group in terms of language use and how you address very sensitive issues, for example, sexual assault. You're not going to mention it by name, but how would you address it with children 5, 6, 7 years of age? Now, when we get to 5.3, the very practical application of your theory, when you have a printed story that you're going to use, it's very easy. It's much easier to approach this question, do this question, than when you are using a story, an oral story. Let's start with when you have a book, a physical book. Obviously, when you're going to read to a class, you need to introduce the story. How would you do that? It's like a typical lesson. You need to prepare learners for the lesson. So how are you going to use this story to introduce the topic, which is a social challenge you want to address? How are you going to introduce this to your learners? Obviously, you'll start with the illustration on the cover page. Ask them if they like the illustration. What do they think the illustration tells us? What the story is all about? And let them infer from the illustration what they think the story is going to be about. You also use this discussion to determine children's experiences of the social challenge. They may have their own experiences regarding the specific social challenge, and they may want to share it with you or with the class. So you're going to allow them to share their own personal experiences. There might be some vocabulary in the story that might be unfamiliar to the learners. So you need to address that as well. You're going to extend on their vocabulary. Now you've used the front page or the cover page and the illustration. Now you're going to start reading the story. Whatever the social challenge, the characters in the story is in some way or another going to deal, because a story's got a theme and a setting and a context and a plot. So you're going to use the plot in the story throughout to ask the children, have you noticed this? Do you agree with the way that the characters is dealing this situation? Would you, as the learners, would have dealt with it the same way or differently? Do you think they've learned from the situation? Do you think they would be able to deal with it in future differently? What advice would you give children that's dealing with similar challenges. So what we're basically doing in question 5.3 is to go back to those types of comprehension on page 30, and now you apply in terms of a story. What kind of questions would you ask? So that's what's required of you in terms of 5.3. 5.4, there's a bit of theory there. You can refer to page 39. It's asking you to explain what you understand social and emotional development is. And then once again, the application always comes back to how are you going to use children's literature? How are you going to use a story to enhance children's social and emotional development? So it's theory and application. 5.5, you have to come up with some practical and creative ideas. How to deal with a disruptive child. You are now reading a story, and this little one is disrupting your story book session, your story reading. How do you deal with that learner in that moment? Why is he disrupting your class? So you've got to share why children sometimes disrupt storytelling or storybook reading sessions. Give reasons. It may be that there's some underlying physical challenge, like they can't sit still for some or other reason. I don't want to use the word hyperactive, but for some or other reason, they find it difficult to sit still and to concentrate. Then you can do simple things, like give the child a hula hoop, put it down on the mat, and let the child sit in that hula hoop area, and he's not allowed to move from that. Or something similar, like a bathroom mat. And the child has to stay in or on that specific area. Or sometimes parents ask that child that can't sit still to just come and stand behind the teacher's chair and maybe just rubs shoulders because her hands or arms are getting so tired of holding the book up for the rest of the class to see the illustrations. Whatever practical example you can come up with. Remember to also reassess the appropriateness of the story. It might be that this specific story that you're reading is not speaking to that, or is not appropriate for the age group, and then you'll find them to become restless when you read the story. So come up with real practical and creative ideas of how to deal with disruptive learners when you read a story, not just general stuff, when you read a story. Now let's go to the various learning units. So this is just what we're going to address in the remaining of the time. The focus of learning unit 1, in each and every learning unit, there are some concepts that you need to understand. So we're going to look at the concepts in learning unit 1. We're going to look at the genres. We are going to see how to analyze those genres, and we're going to once again look at context and the importance of context. So if we jump straight to concepts, those are the 4 most important concepts that you need to define. Please define in your own words, otherwise we can't determine if you do understand what it's about. So children's literature, it's stories written by adults for the enjoyment of children. And remember, it also includes traditional oral storytelling. It's as simple as that. Don't come up with very elaborate and complex definitions. Genres, also very simple. What kind of book do you like to read? It refers to the style, the content, or the form, and you can give the examples there. There are 4 genres, which is poetry, drama, fiction, and non-fiction. Context, I'd already explained to you. It refers to a familiar physical environment or cultural environment that the child can relate to. And then Africanization, once again, it's the recognition or affirmation of the African culture or heritage. It refers to the acknowledgement of indigenous knowledge systems, or simply put, stories that originated on the African continent. African children will relate more to stories that originated on the African continent. Now, if we go to genres, in your study guide, the genres or the types of children's literature is not very in a clear point by point manner. It's not very clear there. So use the slide to guide you. So first of all, you will find picture books. Now under picture books, you will have various sorts of types of picture books. It refers to baby books. Now, if I say baby books, remember the example that I've given you when I discussed Piaget. It's those very small books that you give to babies that have 2 or 3 or 4 pages. It's very thick pages so that they can turn the pages. Remember, they don't have control over their muscles yet, small fine motor control. They need books that are easy to handle with rounded corners. They can play with the books in the bath. They can chew it. That is what we mean when we say baby books. Then rhymes, you're all familiar with books with rhymes. And in Learning Unit 3, we'll discuss the importance of rhymes. Toy books is typically those books that's got flaps, that if you lift the flap, there's something hiding under the flap, or pop-ups, or a circle where you're required to press with your finger, and if you do so, it will make a sound. That's the toy books. Then concept books is, and I'm sure you've all seen it before, is where they use a theme like the farm or vehicles or whatever the theme may be. And all the pictures in that book will just be focused on whatever the theme is. Then you're all familiar with alphabet books, children learning the ABC, or counting books, learning to count 1, 2, 3. Wordless picture books are ideal to use, especially in communities where the parents don't have very high levels of literacy, and they don't feel very comfortable to read because they might not be able to do so. And it's also good to use for young learners that starts to read, where there are no words that's telling the story, it's just illustrations. And you come up with your own story. You use the illustration to come up with your own story. And every time you read the book, you can change your story. It's fun. Easy to read beginner books are those very first books that children are exposed to when they start reading. So there might be a sentence like, this is John, John lives in and then there's just a picture of a house. And then he would say house, so he thinks he's reading. Then we move to the traditional forms of literature. Folklore, make sure that you can identify or distinguish between folklore, fables, myths, legends, fairy tales, fantasy, and historical fiction. Those are in your study guide. And then lastly, of course, non-fiction, informational books and biographies. So usually towards the end of the foundation phase, children will start to engage with informational books and biographies. Now, often you would find parents would say, my child doesn't like to read. I want to read him fairy tales, but he's just not interested. It's fine. There are so many types of books, so many genres to choose from. Just find the kind of story that the child will love, but make sure that you promote a love for reading. Just choose the correct books. The analysis of genres, this is not in your study guide, but this is how you decide whether it's a good book or not. So, the characters, do you like the characters? Do they speak to you? The theme, like remember that question where we're addressing a social challenge? The theme might be bullying or name calling or whatever, that's the theme. Then the style of the story sets the mood. Then setting, the setting of the story, it might be, it refers to the context, sort of like, is it a rural environment, is it a city context, or whatever. And then the importance of the illustrations. In children's books, illustrations play a major role. Children would prefer stories with more illustrations, more bright colors, less words than stories with fewer illustrations and lots of words. They don't like those. So on the one hand, you will select books based on the characters, the theme, the style, the setting, and the illustrations. But on the other hand, the purpose for the classroom, you are a teacher. You might just want to read to them for fun, then it's fine. But often you would find that you would want them to read independently. You would want to select books to have in the reading corner. Then you would find books that are slightly below the level of the reader so that they can engage and read on their own without coming to run to you every 2 or 3 minutes to ask what word is this. So this is what we mean by purpose for the classroom. Do you want to teach phonics? Then your book will be a quite different one than when you just want to read for fun. And then appropriateness and appeal simply refers to, is it on par with the age and developmental level of the child? Those are on page 10 and 11 of your study guide. You can just go and study that. How to select stories. This is the information that you have to give when you answer assignment 2, question 2.1 and 2.2. So I've already dealt with it in detail. Now, context, I've already mentioned it when we discussed the definition of context. So it may refer to a physical environment or a cultural environment, traditions, or a social theme. So just make sure when you select a story that children will be able to relate to the context of the story. If you want, for example, to read a story for children in a rural area, I'm thinking of a very specific book now where a child is going shopping with her mother and they have to use the elevator or the escalator. I can't remember which one of the two, and she was just too scared. Do you think a child in a rural environment will relate to that story? No, they won't, because they never get into a big city where they maybe use an escalator or an elevator or whichever one of the two it is. So just make sure that the theme is appropriate. If you really need more assistance, you can go to the module site. The e-tutors are available. I've posted some activities, online activities for you to go and view and do, and there are some better explanations of the concepts. Just go and regularly visit the module site and see what's available online to guide you in your study. When it's an application question, always make sure that you are very practical and to the point, and that it relates to children's literature, children learning to become literate, how to use stories and books to achieve that goal. Now we're going to move to Unit 2. Once again, we're going to discuss the concepts, how to create a print-rich environment, how to plan a read-aloud session, the types of comprehension that we've already sort of like discussed, and questioning techniques when you read a storybook. The 3 concepts that you can focus on in this learning unit, I won't ask you any others. Make sure in your own words you can explain to me what you understand by the concept of reading, comprehension, and a print-rich environment. Now, the definition for reading and comprehension overlap a great deal, because reading is how to make sense of symbols, to understand what symbols mean, how to decode and encode symbols. Comprehension is then the same thing, but how to make meaning. Not to just read, because reading is a very technical skill. So it doesn't help much if you've learned how to read, but you can't make any sense of what you're reading. If I can code or decode printed text, and you give me text that is printed in German or French or Mandarin, I might be able to decode it and read it. But would I make sense of it? No. So you would need to understand the language, and that's why language and vocabulary is so important. And print-rich environment refers to the availability of text in the familiar or immediate environment of a child, which is not just only books. When you are in a rural area, you may not have access to books. But what can you use? What print can you use that's available in your environment? Billboards, logos in the environment, whatever packaging material you have in your house. Use those to sensitize children towards the alphabet and how to use or how to make sense of the printed word text. You need to understand what a print-rich environment is. I've already explained that to you now. Why a print-rich environment is so important and how you would create a print-rich environment even if you don't have the resources to buy expensive books. How would you do that? Go and sit and try and make sense of this. So why a print-rich environment is so important, that is how children, when we're going to discuss emergent literacy now, we're going to learn and see it's a process of learning to make sense of the code, that is our language, that is given to us in symbols, the alphabet. So they may learn my name starts with a B or a S or a M, and you would draw a child's attention to wherever you would see that letter in the environment. It may be the name of a shop or a billboard or wherever in the environment. And that's the way a child learns to make sense of the printed word. And how would you create a print-rich environment? You don't need lots of money to do it. Just draw his attention to whatever is available in the environment. Which brings me to, and I almost forgot, when you discuss a print-rich environment, don't just discuss the resources in terms of books and maybe drawing material or whatever. Print-rich environment also includes the interaction between a child and an adult around print and text. It may be a simple activity like drawing up a shopping list or reading a recipe when you want to bake a cake or whatever. So it's more than just the resource, the book. It's also about the engagement around that resource. So now we're just for a while going to focus on planning a read aloud session or a storybook session. So basically this and the information is on page 22 and page 23 of your study guide. So I'm not going to take you through it. You're going to do it on your own. But this is basically, remember that question in assignment 2, question 5.2, where you select a story, and question 5.3, where you explain how you would use that story. This was what was required of you. You need to go and have a look on page 22 and 23 of your study guide and use that information to answer question 5.3. Now, in your study guide, in this particular learning unit, it elaborates on the approaches you would use to teach reading in a classroom. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not going to focus on whole class reading or group reading or paired reading or shared reading or independent reading. For me, it's about reading to a child, and children love it when adults read to them. So I'm going to focus on how to read aloud a story to children, and that's why I'm focusing on page 22 and 23, and it gives you clear and explicit guidelines on how to choose a book, how to prepare before you start reading, during reading, and after reading. So go and study that. When it comes to comprehension levels, remember there are 6 levels. In question 3, we only give you 4 and ask you to discuss those 4. Remember, when you answer assignment 2, question 3, add another one of these. Now, once again, the theory is not so important. More importantly is how you apply this. So when, let's say for instance, once again, you're reading a story and you have an illustration, it might be the illustration on the cover page or illustration in the book. What questions can you ask based on the illustration to enhance children's understanding of the story? So therefore, you've got to understand what literal comprehension is. It's the straightforward information that you find in a text. You skim through, you scan the text, and you find the information. What is the color of the horse? Brown. There's no issue about it. You just go and you find it. You see, okay, it's brown, the horse is brown, there you go. How many children are there? You go count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many animals are there? So this is what we mean by literal comprehension. Then reorganization is based on the literal information. You ask questions. For example, do you think it's wild animals or domesticated animals in the story? That kind of thing. So now they've got to think a little bit more. Inference is where they've got to infer. So the answer is not clear in the text, but they must infer. For example, what season do you think it is? Do you think it's winter, summer, spring, autumn? Why do you say so? Then prediction is to predict what's going to happen next. So the sun is shining and the children are playing. What do you think is going to happen next if it's going to rain? For example, what do you think it's going to happen? Evaluation is where children need to evaluate. Do you think the children in this illustration are happy? Why do you say so? And then personal response. They've got to give their own personal response. Which is your favorite animal? So that's the kind of questions. If you go back to assignment 2, question 5.3, that's the kind of questions you're going to ask. So questioning techniques, I've actually addressed it. You're going to ask sort of like questions to introduce the story. You've got to assess their prior knowledge. You've got to let them have some discussion so that you can draw from the discussion what their personal experiences are around the theme or the topic that you're going to read about. Extend their vocabulary. Then we're going to address, and I'm not going to do it now, we're going to address print awareness and phonological awareness in the next learning unit. And the reason why we ask these many questions is to consolidate the information and to enhance the understanding of the text. Just be mindful, there are 2 types of questions. The one is open-ended, or it may be closed type of questions. Now, closed questions is when you ask a question like, did you eat breakfast today? You're going to say yes or no. That's a closed question. So it's a simple, straightforward yes or no. That's what you're going to get. There's no discussion around it. But open-ended questions, the child cannot just give you a simple yes or no. He's got to elaborate or to explain. So make sure you don't always just ask yes/no questions. You want to elicit a response from them. Once again, I want to refer you to the e-tutors and to the module content on my module site. Make sure you engage in the online activities. Now, the last unit we're going to discuss today, we're going to focus on emergent literacy and emergent numeracy. This is very important because this lays the foundation for reading. And a child's experience of books and stories in this phase of development will determine whether he loves reading or avoids it at all costs. So the 2 concepts that you need to understand and that I'm going to focus on is simply this 2. You need to explain in your own words what you understand by emergent literacy and emergent numeracy. Now, both of them is a process of learning. There's no magical point in a child's life, no magical moment where a child out of the blue is ready to learn to read or write. It doesn't miraculously happen the day when he puts on his school uniform and he walks through the school gates and he sits behind his desk. Now he's all of a sudden ready. No, it's a process that already starts at birth. And parents plays a huge role in preparing learners or enhancing and developing this process. So it refers to the process of learning to read and write before formal reading instruction. And then the two concepts that you need to understand, and I'm going to discuss it now in depth, is print awareness and phonological awareness. And in this, the process of language development is extremely important. The better a child's language and the bigger his vocabulary, the quicker a child, the easier a child will learn to read and make meaning. So language plays an important role. Then emergent numeracy is basically the same thing. It's a process of understanding mathematical concepts. And the CAPS document mentions number operations, it's knowing 1, 2, 3, and counting down objects, and know how to add and subtract and multiply and divide. Then also space and shape, patterns, measurement, and data handling. So, why is children's literature so important? Now we come back to child development. Remember, I've told you that parents actually have a huge role to play in this, because children's literacy enhances if the opportunity is grabbed. Also, to mention that, you enhance cognitive development because it involves vocabulary and language, and reasoning, physical development, social development, as well as emotional development, like we've seen in question 5, where we address social challenges, how we can use children's literature to address challenges, whether emotional or social. So this, for me, is the focus of Learning Unit 3. So you will find it on page 43, and it illustrates what we understand the components are of emergent literacy. So there you would see the circle on the left, language, which includes vocabulary and background knowledge and semantics and how you communicate. Then phonological awareness, and I'm going to explain it to you now. That's why rhymes and stories with rhyme is so important. And then print awareness, which includes knowledge of the alphabet, why children need to know the letters of the alphabet and the sounds. So it's not just singing A, B, C, D, E, but to know that this letter is an A and it says ah. And then concepts about print that refers to children's got to learn how to handle a book. This is a book, this is the front page, this is the back page. You open it from the front, from the cover, and you page. From the right side, you page over to the left side. Then you read first the page on the left-hand side, then the page on the right-hand side. You read from top to bottom. You read from left to right. You don't read illustrations. In the beginning they do, but we actually need to learn to read text. So there's a difference between text and illustration. What is a word? What is a sentence? What is the meaning of the spaces between words? So that is what we mean by concepts about print. And it's all explained on page 43, phonological awareness. This is the important one that I want to explain to you. Remember when we've talked about the definition of a print-rich environment, and it's not just about providing books, but the kind of discussions and interaction there is between the child and the adult. This is what is so important. This is the crux of cracking the code, so to speak. How to make sense of printed text and start reading. The most important, it's a continuum of skills, and it starts with the most basic there at the bottom step, listening. So children need to listen. They need to distinguish between the different sounds. And that sounds, the string of sounds that you hear, can be written down. You can write it down. So whatever you see on paper, it actually refers to what someone has said. Then rhymes. Children need to learn, they learn through rhymes. So an easy way is, for example, if you say, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you, and you don't need to provide the next one, let them guess and let them come up with other words that rhyme. That is an important skill when they learn to read word families. Like I've said, they've learned to distinguish between what is a word, what is a sentence, what is the purpose of the space between sentences. Then the next thing, and they usually learn this very quickly, is to segment words. Like when they say their name, Joshua, they clap. Joshua. Tabu. And this helps them when they start to read and they can't immediately identify the word, and they have to break it down. Segmentation is a useful skill. That's why we teach them this skill. Then first actually a syllable segmentation, and then you would go to segmenting a word on a sound level, where you learn makes the word cat. So it's 3 letters in that particular order. And there are many games you can play. And you will learn that in the module that's concerned with reading in the foundation phase. So just here you need to know what the skills are, the concepts within phonological awareness. And when you read a child a story, to draw his attention to, oh, look at this cat. What does cat starts with? Can you think of other words that starts with the same sound? You know, that kind of thing. Then emergent numeracy. Remember, when you read, you can also integrate with other subjects. Like, let's use a simple story like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. In that story, you are already introducing counting as a concept, 1, 2, 3. But you're also introducing big, bigger, biggest, or small, smaller, smallest. And those are mathematical concepts. And those are the very basic concepts that children have to learn to lay a foundation for mathematics. So when you read a story, also be aware of what mathematical concepts there are in a story that you didn't read for the purpose to teach mathematics, but the opportunity is right there. Just use it to draw their attention to bigger, smaller, faster, slower. The tortoise and the hare, the story of the tortoise and the hare, faster, slower, the concept of time, you know, that kind of thing. Use those opportunities in stories when it presents itself. So this is the last slide before I end off once again. Remember to visit the module site and do the online activities. It's there to help you. Just to be clear, Learning Unit 3 makes mention of general school readiness skills. I will not ask you those because once again, whatever information there is, you need to apply. How can we use children's literature to enhance the development of a child's readiness to learn how to read and write? So I won't ask you questions on general school readiness. I will be much more specific. So this is the end. For next time, read through all the content, Learning Unit 1, 2, and 3 that I've covered today. And if you want to and you have time, go and have a look, go and read up on the next 3 learning units. And then, by then, everyone should have handed in assignment 1, and I'll discuss that with you. And then we're going to focus on an in-depth study of learning units 4, 5, and 6. So this is all from me for today. Enjoy your studies. Enjoy reading. I hope you yourself are avid readers and you love reading. Thank you. Bye-bye.